The Arctic P14 SLIM. Is this fan worth your time and money? Or is it just another P12 SLIM? Let's find out. What's up everyone, Eric here and welcome to Hardware for Gamers. For those of you who are new to the channel, I test and review PC cases, CPU coolers, PC case fans, and graphics cards. Before I get onto the overview, to have full disclosure, I did buy this fan myself to test and review, so all opinions expressed in this video are mine and mine alone. So if you do end up liking this video, please hit that like button, and if you really like the video, how about subscribing? I would like to take a minute to thank my patrons for supporting the channel. Thank you very much. If you'd like to support the channel via Patreon, there is a link down in the description to the Patreon page and how all that stuff works. Okay, let's take a quick look at the Arctic P14 lineup. And there are quite a few fans in this lineup. There is the Arctic P14, which has a 3-pin connector and a max rated RPM of 1700. There is the P14 Silent, which has a 3-pin connector and a max rated RPM of only 950. There is the P14 SLIM PWM PST, which has a 4-pin PWM connector, a max rated RPM of 1800, a built-in fan splitter, and a profile of only 16 millimeters. There is the P14 PWM, which has a 4-pin PWM connector and a max rated RPM of 1700. There is the P14 PWM PST, which again has a 4-pin PWM connector, a max rated RPM of 1700, but this does have that built-in fan splitter. There is the P14 PWM PST ARGB, which has a 4-pin PWM fan connector, a max rated RPM of 1900, the built-in fan splitter, and an ARGB lead. And finally, there's the P14 PWM PST CO. So this does have a dual ball bearing, a 4-pin PWM connector, and a max rated RPM of 1700, and the built-in fan splitter. So I tested the Arctic P14 SLIM PWM PST. As I just said, it has a max rated RPM of 1800. This does have a 0 dB mode, so the blades will stop spinning completely. There are 7 blades, even though all those blades are connected to one another. It has a 16 millimeter profile. It is a fluid dynamic bearing. The cable is 400 millimeters and you get Arctic's 6-year warranty. Okay, before getting onto the results of my tests, I wanted to be very clear that all this testing is based off a sample size of 1. So this isn't the exact performance you'll get with this fan, but it will give you a really good representation on what to expect if you buy this fan. Okay, starting with the PWM range. So with the PWM of the motherboard set to 100%, this fan has an RPM of 1940-ish. At 50% PWM, this fan has an RPM of 1170-ish. At 0% PWM, this fan stops spinning, so an RPM of 0. The fan kicked on at 10% PWM. The motherboard isn't showing the RPM because it doesn't start showing RPMs until around 300 RPM. But I took out my tachometer and this does have an RPM of 200-ish. So the P14 SLIM does have a good RPM range. Before moving on to my standardized testing, if you are appreciating all the work I've done here, could you please support the channel by using my Amazon Associates links that are in the description? All you need to do is click on the link that suits your location, and when you add an item or items to your cart and order them, the channel will get a small kickback at no added cost to you. So it is a great way to support the channel without actually putting up any money directly to the channel. And if you do have any questions on how I test the fans, please watch my fan testing methodology video. I go over the how and what's there. There will be a card along the top, and I will also have it linked down in the description. But please note, I have updated the cooler that I use for the CPU cooling performance tests to the Frost Grinder 140. This way I can test 140 and 120 millimeter fans using the same cooler. As always, starting off with the dBA and RPM. So at 4 volts, I measured the dBA at 32.2 and the RPM at 855. At 6 volts, the dBA went up to 32.6, while the RPM went up to 1205. At 8 volts, I measured the sound level at 32.8 dBA, and the RPM was at 1500. At 10 volts, I measured the sound level at 33.5 dBA, and that had the RPM at 1725. Finally, at 12 volts, the dBA went up to 34.8, and that had the RPM at 1925. Okay, now for the sound recordings at each of these voltages, but first the ambient room noise for your reference. The air testing is next. As usual, I have the dBA numbers still up on the chart for your reference. At 4 volts with no obstructions, it had an FPM of 115. With the mesh panel, it had an FPM of 80. And with the cover panel, it had an FPM of 20. Jumping up to 12 volts to save a little bit of time here. With no obstructions, it had an FPM of 380. With the mesh panel, it had an FPM of 330. And with the cover panel, it had an FPM of 170. Moving right along to the CPU cooling performance. At 4 volts, the average steady state temperature was at 83.7. At 6 volts, it was at 80 C. At 8 volts, it was at 77.4 C. At 10 volts, it was at 75.7 C. And at 12 volts, it was at 75.2 C. Okay, I will be comparing the Arctic P14 SLIM PWM PST to the Arctic 14 PWM PST, the Arctic P12 SLIM PWM PST, and the Be Quiet Lightwings 140. So when comparing the P14 SLIM to these other fans, we see that all of these fans are pretty much in around that same dB when voltage equalized. Moving on to the airflow. So with all the fans voltage equalized and with no obstructions, the P14 SLIM is moving about the same amount of air as the Lightwings 140 is. With the mesh panel, things look much the same, but the Lightwings 140 does maintain its performance a little bit better than the P14 SLIM does at 10 and 12 volts. In the cover panel testing, there is a large FPM drop across all the fans, with the P14 SLIM maintaining an okay amount of performance when compared to the Lightwings 140 and the P14 PWM PST. Moving on to the CPU cooling performance. So with all the fans voltage equalized and the chart zoomed in, the P14 SLIM has okay performance at 8, 10, and 12 volts for a slim profile fan. Now for the 34 dBA testing. So having all the fans noise equalized to 34 dBA or 12 volts if they don't actually get up to 34 dBA. So with no obstructions, the P14 SLIM has an FPM of 335, which has it just about right in the middle of the chart. With the mesh panel, the P14 SLIM has an FPM of 290, which again has it in around the middle of the chart. Then with the covered panel, the P14 SLIM has an FPM of 150, which has it moving up a little bit, meaning that it does or is able to maintain its performance better than some of these other fans do at the 34 dBA mark. So what do I think of the Arctic P14 SLIM PWM PST? All in all, it's a pretty okay fan for what it is. Now, typically you should only be using a slim profile fan if you don't have the clearance for a standard profile fan. And that is why this is a very niche fan, because a lot of small form factor cases, so places where you're likely going to be wanting to use a slim profile fan, don't have full support for 140 millimeter fans. However, if you are one of the people that find themselves in this situation that are in a very tight clearance area or situation, and the case that they're working in does actually support 140 millimeter fans, the Arctic P14 SLIM PWM PST should work pretty well for you. But yeah, it is really going to be niche because it just, I do understand a lot of small form factor cases do have 140 millimeter support. It's just like for one or two spots, not the whole case. So it really comes down to a very specific situation on if these are going to make sense for you. If they do make sense for you, they are a good fan. And I guess I'll just be leaving it at that because I really don't know what else to say. They are a good fan. It's just, if you can find a situation to use them that makes sense, use them. Cool? Cool. So if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you're still watching and you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so you get notified whenever I drop a new video. There is the HFG Discord server. It is completely free to join, and I do put up all of my charts for my case testing, my CPU cooler testing, and my fan testing up on the HFG Discord server, just so that if you can check back there to see if there's any other fans or cases that might perform better than the video you just watched. There's also Patreon if you'd like to support the channel directly. Again, there is a link down in the description to the Patreon page. You might want to check out this video here. Likely will be the same lines as this video you just watched. Likely will be another fan video or something along those lines. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.